in order for that shopping experience to be elevated, right, like across the board, right, like what are some of the e-commerce retailers having to do or redo, right? Because, like you said, we as consumers are getting more trained for more intuitive experiences because maybe that's what we are seeing in a few select
Hmm.
places, right? Like
Hmm.
Amazon and like ChatGPT and Google, right? Like,
Right.
but then if I'm going shopping on Wayfair or I'm
Hmm.
going shopping on something else, right? Like,
Hmm.
so Walmart, right? Like, so what are the e-commerce retailers? Because they're
Hmm.
not all gonna sit and build their own LLM models,
Right. Right.
right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So what are you seeing there,
Yeah.
them to respond to this? Trend?
Yeah. I think there are two aspects of that. One is um, how they ensure that what their products that they're selling are showing up in the right way. That's one element of it, and that's off their platform. And then on their platform, they also need to think about how to use AI in order to do that as well. So let's separate those two out. And let's first of all talk about how do you prepare yourself for those new AI driven experiences that
Mhm.
are being created, elsewhere, whether it's social, whether it's on search platforms, whatever it
Mhm.
may be. And in the world of shopping, the fundamental element to this is the type of data that you can pass over
Mhm.
to these partners.
Mhm.
And in many respects,
Mhm.
that starts with a feed of
Mhm.
data.
Mhm.
And feeds have always been fundamental for passing data, safely to a partner like a social platform or search platform.
Mhm.
What's become even more important is what you include in that feed. So, actually, the volume of content that you need in that feed is growing. So, let me give you a little bit of an example to bring this to life. And the very basic um, element of this, your description of your product needs to be much more nuanced,
Mhm.
and a larger description. And just
Mhm.
so happens that we have LLMs that can provide those better descriptions of products. You can
Mhm.
literally upload an image, get a description of your product, and add that to your feed. Why
Mhm.
is that important? Because as users are searching in much more depth and with much more sort of, as I described it, an
Yeah.
intuitive approach, you need to ensure that LLMs have the right information to making the right inference
Mhm.
about whether that product is a good match for that user's need. So at the core of it is just
Yeah.
description. But then you get into the world of, detailed attributes. So it's so crucial to ensure that you've got the right details around things like, I mean, I work quite heavily in the clothing and apparel space.
Mhm. Yeah.
So fit,
Yeah.
style,
Yeah.
color, sizing, all of these things to make sure that you've got the right coverage on all of those attributes.
Yeah.
Then descriptors are also extremely important. And these are things that sort of like manually input, like a description of the product, a
Mhm.
shorter description, so there's more to infer. But then you go into more visual media. So the need now for imagery and large volumes of imagery is
Yeah.
really high. Previously it used to be you'd get away with a couple of images of a product and that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now you need a large volume of imagery, from to bring that product to life because with users inputting imagery to search, it
Yeah.
needs to match, or a good way to match it is to imagery. So imagine passing that imagery across, and then video as well, multimedia
Yeah.
is super important to pass as well. Plus, when you think about that imagery and how important that is, it's also really important to think about variations of the same image, like background settings,
Mhm.
models, so on and so forth, where there's a lot more to match to context, given how much an LLM can grasp
Yeah.
context. So, for example, the the cocktail dress, in a London restaurant is going to be a different thing that somebody's going to be looking for in the user's mind
Yeah.
than the cocktail dress in the Mediterranean location, because
Yeah.
the material is going to be different. You're not going to want something so warm in the Mediterranean location. All these things are actually, they're all crucial, and actually an LLM will be able to make much more of an inference about which product to match. So having variations in product imagery is absolutely crucial. So that's the biggest piece of advice that I have, like as a fundamental on
Yeah.
the shopping piece. And it's also kind of interesting how much these feeds are actually helping from let's say more organic experiences as well as paid media experiences. So they're absolutely crucial.
So essentially, what you're saying is that as the consumers' shopping habits are changing and expectations are changing, under the hood, the e-commerce retailers and providers have to really rethink their product strategies, right? Like in
Right.
the sense of like marketing strategies around their product, right? And start getting even more detailed because
Exactly.
in a way, it's almost like they are preparing for the AI agents to be shopping, right?
Right.
You know what I
Which
mean?
is
Like, I think we're moving in that direction right now, that the
exactly.
AI agents and the LLMs, they can really understand a high
Yeah.
level of verbosity.
Right.
So the metadata that we have to provide in order for us to be discovered,
Yeah.
it has to essentially make sense to, and match the verbosity level, right? Like, is how I'm making sense in my head.
Exactly, exactly. And then, I described the how do you ensure that you're showing up effectively on other platforms as an
Yeah.
e-commerce retailer, but for your own e-commerce experience, there's some crucial elements to explore. The first one is, how do LLMs assist the shopping experience?
Yeah. Okay.
Um, there's just some great updates from Stitch Fix in the last week or so, as they've re-engineered their e-commerce experience to be fundamentally driven by an AI agent.
Hmm.
Um, this is a retailer that's thinking very carefully about streamlining the whole shopping experience.
Mhm.
And actually, AI can really do that. You can chat with an AI stylist to find your style, find the right product for you,
Hmm.
start to basket build and infer more about what you might want in future packages that get sent out to you. Like, there's several experiences like that that are being created. You mentioned Wayfair, in the furniture space. For a while now, there's been a lot of experimentation with augmented reality, being
Yeah.
able to drop the item into your location, so your spot, so that you can actually see and almost feel what
Yeah.
that item is going to be looking like. These are much more assistive experiences. And, that's one way to help navigate users through the buying process. However, there is a big area of opportunity now, I feel, is in making recommendations.
Hmm.
And, with the capability that LLMs have to understand user behavior, actually AI driven on-site recommendations have become so much more powerful. And that's an area that I think, it's often difficult for a retailer to build as effectively as some of these large hyperscalers are building, because of the capability they have to train models in so many different settings, that
Yeah.
once it's applied to an e-commerce retailer's website, the way that it's inferring the consumer data improves the recommendations so much.
It's very interesting because I think we all, right, like learned first or experienced recommendations firsthand with
Mm,
Amazon, right? I mean,
mm,
and Netflix, right? Like
mm.
these were the two consumer brands that did it really, really well. But
Yeah,
it's an interesting point because they also have armies of engineers who were
right.
working on the models. So I
Yeah,
think what you're saying is that it's going to actually bring that similar or even a more enhanced recommendations experience to pretty much like all e-commerce,
Exactly.
retailing experience. And that's okay, that's a shift that we will
Yeah.
see.
Right.